Now for Dr. Albert Ellis.
They say he cursed like a sailor, but healed like a saint. He was loud, brash, and hyper, and at times a pretty funny guy. A philosopher, a best-selling author, and humanitarian. Despite being a bit rough around the edges, he is thought to be one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century and a pioneering figure in the field of psychology. Albert Ellis, the cut creator of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy and the Grandmaster Flash of cognitive behavioral therapy. Growing up on the mean streets of early 20th century New York City, little Albert, the oldest of three, was burdened with the responsibility of caring for his two younger siblings due to his father's frequent business trips and his mother's uninvolved and emotionally detached parenting style. According to Ellis, his mother slept a lot or was otherwise unavailable, and when she did engage with him, it was often in a manic or depressive state. Some believe that his dismal upbringing and the divorce of his parents at the age of 12 was what first inspired Ellis to seek a greater understanding of what makes people tick. By junior high, Ellis had already decided he wanted to become a great American novelist. After completing college with a degree in business administration, Ellis started a pants-matching business with his brother, but spent most of his spare time writing. And although he was quite prolific at writing fiction and had written dozens of manuscripts by the time he was in his late 20s, he had not yet become a published writer, so he switched gears and started writing strictly non-fiction and promoting what he referred to as the sex-family revolution.
Well, I was always a rebel, always fighting somebody or other, and I became a sex revolutionist instead of a political revolutionist.
Having a keen interest in sex from an early age and not being a fan of monogamy, Ellis wrote books like The Case for Promiscuity, Sex Without Guilt, Nymphomania, and Women, How to Handle Them.
I was an authority on sex, and I thought that Freud didn't know a damn thing about sex. He unfortunately stuck with Martha all his life, so he had no idea about the sexuality of women and what to do to satisfy them.
Many of Ellis's friends regarded him as an expert on sex and relationships and would often seek his advice, which led him to realize that he enjoyed counseling as much as writing. This new appreciation for counseling inspired Ellis to return to school and pursue his master's degree in clinical psychology. After obtaining his master's degree, he began a part-time private practice in family and sex counseling. And a few years later, Ellis earned a doctorate and then began training to become a psychoanalyst. An interesting side note to Ellis's preoccupation with sex is that he admitted to being a serial frotteur as a teen and into his early 20s. That is, he would seek out crowded places like subway cars, elevators, and movie theaters, and rub up against unsuspecting women in order to achieve sexual gratification. And although he ceased to engage in fraudeurism and was ashamed of his fraudeuristic exploits, Ellis would always have an intense interest in sex and was a self-confessed heterosexual pervert. Perhaps not the best moniker post-Me Too movement, but his admission of guilt does seem to illustrate Ellis's candidness and willingness to examine his own moral frailties in order to further his understanding of the mind and kindly share the knowledge. After completing psychoanalysis training under the tutelage of an analyst from the Karen Horney Group, Ellis worked at various jobs in New Jersey as a teacher, clinical psychologist, and eventually as a chief psychologist. Although he was a superb psychoanalyst and was highly regarded in the field, Ellis became disenfranchised with psychoanalysis and had begun to lose faith in its effectiveness. So he began to integrate some of his own sex family techniques into his counseling sessions, such as offering advice and direct interpretations. Over time, Ellis fine-tuned his own methods and techniques and gradually developed what he called Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. Compared to the somewhat passive psychoanalytic method, REBT is a more direct, action-oriented approach to psychotherapy that focuses on helping people recognize and learn how to control their irrational beliefs, which subsequently helps them to manage their emotions and behaviors in healthier ways. REBT has three main tenets. Firstly, we are all fallible, but we are all worthy of self-acceptance and have no need for shame or guilt. And secondly, we may not always approve of other people's behavior, but they too are worthy of acceptance. And lastly, life is not always a bowl of cherries. Shit happens, and there's no rational reason to expect otherwise.
Get three basic philosophies from the cradle to the grave, but it takes them a little while to really solidly get it, that they are able to unconditionally self-acceptance, USA, to unconditionally have other acceptance, UOA, and unconditionally have life acceptance, ULA, then they won't be deliriously happy all the time, but they'll be a hell of a lot happier than they otherwise would make themselves.
Ellis theorized that people's own irrational beliefs are what cause them to be unhappy. For instance, there are many people who seek perfection in themselves and others and are inevitably frustrated and disappointed when they find perfection to be virtually unattainable. And then there are those who believe that they will be happier if they just avoid life's challenges and difficulties altogether. They feel like they have no control over their own happiness and that external forces are responsible for their misery. Ellis argued that
the best years of your life are the ones in which you decide your problems are your own. You do not blame them on your mother, the ecology, or the president. You realize that you control your own destiny.
at the heart of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy is the ABC model, which posits that activating experiences such as family dysfunction, childhood trauma, or any number of stressful or traumatic events can cause a person to develop certain irrational beliefs, which can consequently lead to unhealthy emotions and behaviors. Once the client's irrational beliefs are identified, the therapist can then help them to dispute those beliefs, which results in an effective new set of rational beliefs and healthier feelings. Ellis's ABC model is one of the main tools used in cognitive behavior therapy and has been used to effectively treat depression, anxiety, addiction, eating disorders, and many other mental health conditions. Aside from his many achievements and groundbreaking innovations, the thing I think I admire most about old Weird Al was his ability to effectively use humor in the therapeutic process. Coining terms and phrases like shooting yourself and masturbation, Ellis helped people to recognize and confront their faulty cognitions with a giggle.
You stop masturbating and go back to happy masturbating.
Ellis believed that most people took themselves and life in general too seriously, and would use humor to help them lighten up.
People disturb themselves. They don't get disturbed. That's psychoanalytic nonsense. They disturb themselves largely by what they tell themselves. And they first take adversities, hassles, problems of life seriously, which is good. But then they take it too seriously and lose their sense of humor. So we have many cognitive thinking techniques, many experiential, emotive feeling techniques, and many behavioral. But one of the ones that overlaps is humor.
He would even have his clients sing silly songs about their stinking thinking.
Could you give us one of these humorous songs?
Well, if you would let me know beforehand, I don't even remember my own songs, but I'll see if I can do one and remember it.
Okay, go for it.
Love me, only me, or I will die without you. Make your love a guarantee so I can never doubt you. Love me totally, really try, dear. For if you man love too, I'll hate you till I die, dear. And it goes on.
Although his outspokenness and irreverent sense of humor would have some referring to him as the Lenny Bruce of psychotherapy, Ellis described himself as being very shy when he was a young man. According to Ellis, he was deathly afraid of speaking to women or speaking in any public forum. But always the tenacious problem solver, he endeavored to conquer his fear by forcing himself to speak to every woman he encountered. And although this little social experiment did not land him a date, he was able to shed his shyness and purge his fear of talking to women and speaking in public. In fact, Ellis turned out to be a real ladies' man, enjoying quite the prolific sex life, although that may be one of the reasons his first two marriages ended in divorce.
I don't like unnecessary restriction. If you want to restrict yourself and marry monogamously, fine, choose it. If I love someone very much and I can only have a relationship with her because she thinks she must have monogamy, I can put up with it. It won't kill me.
Despite suffering numerous health problems which had plagued him for most of his life, Ellis was a tireless workaholic, reportedly seeing as many as 70 patients a week in his late 80s and up to 10 patients a week in his last years of life. Following a long illness, Ellis died on July 24, 2007, at the age of 93. In his lifetime, Ellis authored more than 80 books and published hundreds of articles and monographs. He founded the Institute for Rational Emotive Therapy and was among the vanguard of the cognitive revolution. He is heralded as one of psychology's most influential thinkers, second only to Carl Rogers. Okay, so the fronterism was a bit unsavory, and he may have gotten a little too familiar with some of his female patients. But there can be no doubt that Albert Ellis's innovations and contributions to the field of psychotherapy have helped countless people change for the better the way they think, act, and feel. And the world is a better place because of it.
As Epictetus, a Roman philosopher, said many years ago, it's not what happens to us at point A that upsets us, it's B, our view of what happens to us. And in rational emotive psychotherapy, we go after this individual, the patient's view, and show him that whatever he thinks has upset him, usually some external situation, what somebody else has done, it's really what he's telling himself about this thing, this event, which upsets him. And although he may never be able to do anything about the external event at A, he can change the internal event, his sentence, his belief to himself at B.